Hi everyone, Paul Krugman here with another conversation with my favorite military historian expert, Phillips O'Brien. We're having at least one of these every time the United States starts a new war, which means I guess we're going to be having a lot of them at the rate we've been going. So welcome on the channel, and hi again.
Yeah, I'll see you when he attacks Cuba, right? That's the next one. So we have Iran now and Cuba in a few weeks, I think. But
I'm not sure we have the resources for Cuba, but yeah. Okay, obviously, we're recording this a bit less than 2 weeks into this new war with Iran. There are a couple of specific areas I want to talk about, but first, do you have anything to say that might be a useful
well,
starting point?
I don't think they know what they're doing. And I mean, I think that they had a plan. They basically did what megalomaniacs, or he did what megalomaniac leaders do. They underestimate their enemy and they think they will do this quickly. It's what Putin did to Ukraine in 2022. We'll just march in, we'll do what we want. We have this great military. He was boasting about American military power. And I think he just thought this would be relatively straightforward. He liked to refer to the Venezuela model. And I think he thought, okay, what I'm going to do is blow up the leadership, kill the leadership, and then I'll get a new leadership that will be much more compliant, do what I want. I don't want to actually bring any kind of freedom or democracy to the Iranian people. Because, by the way, he's talking about a leader for the next 5 to 10 years. So he's talking actually about putting another authoritarian place. And he thought it would happen, a little bit harder than Venezuela, it seems, but not much harder. And he completely underestimated what he was taking on. And what he's done is it caught himself now in a strategic plan. They never thought through the second and third order effects. They were nowhere down wondering what would happen if the Strait of Hormuz was cut and they couldn't get anything out of the Gulf. And I think they're just making it up now as they go along.
Yeah, that's what we're all kind of seeing. I want to come back to that a bit, but ask so your specialty has been air power, sea power, and strategic. How wars are fought that way, and in a way, the United States came in with the O'Brien supremacy. We have vastly more, in normal terms or in historic terms, complete air superiority. We have the Navy, but it doesn't. Well, actually, let's talk first about air power. In some ways, it seems like it's more effective, or it can do things.
Well, I mean, the United States and Israel can blow up anything they want in Iran. Or practically anything they want in Iran. They can't get to the deep nuclear stuff, I guess, or at least they're not sure if they can get to it. But otherwise, they could blow up any target on the ground they want to blow up. And there's nothing the Iranians can do. That their air defense is, from what we can tell, mostly been neutralized. The issue with air power is it's great for blowing things up if you have air supremacy, but it's not great for putting anything else in its place. And this is what they hadn't worked out, is that they thought, okay, we'll blow things up and something we want will come along and start ruling Iran in a way that we'd like. They also didn't understand that Iran has air power not to defend itself, but to strike back. So they totally missed the Iranian capacity to strike back. And Iran has struck back with very cheap drones and very cheap sea drones, from what we can tell too, possibly. And so the Americans haven't been able to take out Iran's strike power coming back at them. And it's why we've left in this situation. The U.S. and Israel can destroy anything they want in Iran. And that's what they're doing every night. But that doesn't leave them in the ability to keep Iran from striking back. It doesn't allow them to put anything else in the government's place.
They can destroy anything they can find. I guess part of the issue is that there's stuff you can't find. I mean,
well, their intelligence is. I wrote that article in the Atlantic. It's Trump's. I know the second term. It's only been over a year, but already I think we see signs of rot in American institutions. Yeah. It's that they spent months preparing for this, and on the first day they attacked a girls' school. on one of obviously the high priority targets. You would have thought they would have had the best intelligence possible. They had a long time to prepare this. But what they did is they committed a massive war crime because they didn't have good intelligence. That alone should set alarm bells off. If you're planning this intricate military campaign, you would think at least on the opening strikes, you would have some idea of what you were attacking. But clearly they didn't have an idea of what they were attacking. And if that was the quality of intelligence that they had when it started, now that the Iranians are probably hiding more, spreading things out, trying to protect themselves, we don't know the quality of the intelligence that they're going to have. They don't seem to have gotten, the second supreme leader. So they got the first one because they knew where he was. But since then, they've seemed to have had more trouble tracking down the Iranian leadership. So I think it's a sign of rot that the Trump administration has brought to U.S. institutions.
Yeah, I mean, I was really struck. The decapitation strike, that was an intelligence triumph. As not the weapons were there, but actually being able to find basically the entire leadership and wipe them out on the first day. That seemed to say that they had very good intelligence, and yet on the same day, I guess, they struck this girls' school. And I don't know how I don't quite have don't quite know how to reconcile them, except that maybe they were just not interested in trying to find out what
they didn't have the depth of intelligence. They had very good intelligence on one strike package.
Right.
But they didn't have the depth of intelligence throughout the system. I mean, they've lost a lot of good people. A lot of good people have left the U.S. government. A lot of good analysts. So they might have had enough, ability to do the strike on the leadership with, by the way, the help of the Israelis. We assume, actually, the Israelis played a big role in providing a lot of that intelligence, but they haven't had the depth. And they didn't have the depth to protect those troops in Kuwait. They clearly left American soldiers in Kuwait unprotected. And unable to fight with, or to protect themselves from what they should have anticipated coming at them. So there's just all these really worrying signs. I mean, the U.S. military is still going to win every battle it fights with the Iranians. That's not the issue. They can win any battle. But what we don't know is if they maintain the high-level excellence to actually triumph in this war.
Yeah, the Israelis, the IDF, seems, just very casual observation, they seem to be less degraded as a force, despite the fact that I'm not at all, I don't like at all what Israel has done, and Gaza is a massive war crime, but the IDF seems to be functioning in a way that I'm not sure the U.S. military is. Is that
No, I mean, I think the Israelis have maintained a higher level of military efficiency. I mean, what Israel has done, a very small country, arguably has the second most powerful air force in the world, or third most powerful air force in the world. We don't know how the Chinese one would actually operate, but we can say that the air power in the world is the U.S., China, and Israel, probably in first rank. And no one else would be in that category. And the Israelis also have great intelligence of what is happening in Iran. So that is absolutely key. On the other hand, the Israelis seem to also have a much, we'd say, harsher group of political objectives than the United States. Not that the United States aren't harsh, but the Israelis seem to be wanting to go for full regime change. And they're also not, they're helping the United States, but in some ways they're also leading the United States down a road that the United States might not want to go down.
Okay, and the U.S., it is striking that they don't seem to be able to, as you say, take out the drone sites, the missile sites. Do you have any sense of, how is it that the Iranians are managing to keep these things hidden?
Well, because they're small, they're really easy to launch. You don't need, the U.S. has been thinking in terms of taking out the air power of another country by taking out its major air bases where it keeps its expensive aircraft in actually relatively small numbers. A few hundred would be a very large air force for most people. So the U.S. has been thinking in terms, and you can't spread all these aircraft around everywhere because they need maintenance. Right. So actually, the ability of anyone to exercise traditional air power with fixed-wing aircraft would have a relatively limited number of targets. With these things, they're cheap, they're unpiloted, you don't need a lot of military support, and you can spread them around. So if you have them spread out, they're very hard to find all of them. We remember the Iranians have been preparing for this since last summer, since they were first attacked in that campaign by the Israelis and the United States. So clearly they have been thinking about some kind of strategy of response since then. And it seems what they have done is dispersed a lot of these drones around the country in very small numbers, which is making it difficult for the US and Israel to track them all down.
Now it is astonishing to me. I mean, I thought that they must have been doing that, and I was, pure amateur, but just watching the conflict in Ukraine, it was obvious that drones, cheap missiles were major tools of war, and that if you didn't have a strategy for neutralizing those, you didn't have a strategy. How is it that they didn't know that?
I really thought Trump believed he would have a few days of air raid, decapitate the government, and that would be it. I just don't think it entered their mind. And because no one stands up to him, supposedly there were some military warnings, people saying, the Iranians might fight back and you have to have preparations in case they do. But he seemed to not take those on. And these are people who wear shoes that are too big for them to make him happy. Right? And I think that story about Marco Rubio, that picture, reveals a great deal about where we are. I mean, Rubio was wearing what looked to be the most uncomfortable pair of shoes I've ever seen. I don't know how he kept them on, but he did it because he was humiliated because Trump gave him those shoes. If that is the culture you create around you, you're going to make really bad decisions. What I actually thought, and I'm not saying Trump is Stalin, it's very much the culture Stalin had around him, where he humiliated everyone around him by making them look and be faintly ridiculous. That was actually something he did deliberately. And what happened, of course, is that all they would do is reinforce all his prejudices. And that's why you end up with Stalin saying, oh, Hitler's not going to attack me in June 1941. Never, not going to happen. And everyone around him going, of course, Joseph. Of course they won't do that. And that's where we are. We basically have a Stalin-like court around Trump, and we see the decisions that such a court makes.
Now, I'm trying to understand. I think we knew what air power, conventional air power, could do. What are the capabilities of the kind of stuff that the Iranians have left? I mean, in Ukraine, we learned that there's a kill zone, but there's also a lot beyond that. So can you tell me about
They have one very great geographical advantage. They control the coast of the Gulf to the north. That's basically all Iran. So the Iranians are the north coast of the Gulf. And what they really have to attack to keep that closed is shipping now. And ships are slow. They're slow and big and not that difficult to hit with a drone. And they can't maneuver. They're not going to be able to maneuver out of the way. And these are civilian ships that don't have any protective devices on them. No one seems to want to go in and protect those vessels. So actually, the Iranians have a very easy job in that way, that the targets they're going for are targets that really are not protected. And as long as they can keep attacking those with a small number of drones, they don't need a lot. As long as they can keep shutting down shipping, they are going to put massive pressure on the Trump administration. Oil prices are already up. They dipped a little bit when Trump acted like the war was almost over. They're back up. We've seen real problems with nitrogen supplies and real trouble with helium supplies. And the irony is the only country shipping out of the Gulf is Iran. Iranian shipments of oil are up. So Iran is sending everything it wants out of the Gulf, and they're sending oil directly to the Chinese. I think the Chinese are laughing at this, that they're seeing the U.S. unable to have its allies get their oil out.
Yeah, there were Chinese chartered ships going through the Strait of Hormuz broadcasting in English. We are a Chinese ship carrying Iranian oil, and they were transiting the strait. Just to enlarge this a bit, there's a lot of talk about how the Strait of Hormuz is 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. But in some ways, I think that, as I understand, it's kind of irrelevant. Essentially, the entire Persian Gulf or Arabian Gulf is easy drone range for the
Yeah,
Iranians, right?
it's a very narrow body of water considering the vital shipping that goes through it. More vital than I understood. I had no idea of the value of the nitrogen exports or the helium exports that went through. I had no idea. If someone had told me that 20% of world's fertilizer supplies came out of the Gulf or something like that, I would have had no idea. But considering what a narrow body of water it is and how long the Iranian coast is, I mean, Iran runs along the Gulf for hundreds and hundreds of miles. It just means the Iranians can really pick and choose their targets, and the United States and Israel are going to be left scrambling trying to find every little drone. It's a real needle and haystack kind of situation.
Yeah, it's the So we'd always, again, Ukraine. There's obviously tremendous intellectual crossover between these two wars, and in Ukraine, we talked about this in sort of 40-kilometer wide kill zone, but that's a kill zone for like tanks.
Yep.
And the kill zone for oil tankers has got to be, basically the entire Gulf.
There is not a safe place in the Gulf for an oil tanker. I can't believe there'd be any safe place. And by the way, the Americans are acknowledging that because the tankers have asked for American escorts, and the United States won't even send warships into the Gulf. The fact that the United States is rebuffing requests for escorts that they're getting means that they don't believe that they can keep U.S. warships safe in the Gulf right now. And that's a pretty damning indictment that if you go to war and have not anticipated you might need to protect your own warships in this vital body of water, it reveals a lot about the shoddy nature of the strategic planning we're seeing.
I'm not even sure what an escort would do. I mean, I guess maybe an escort might have essentially
we try to shoot down. I mean, we try to shoot down the drones with Gatling guns or different kinds of technologies that they would have. I mean, they could use Aegis, very expensive systems, but you might try to just shoot down all the drones you can with the escorting ships. I suppose that's the thinking involved.
The Ukrainians have developed some, since we keep on not giving them Patriot missiles, they've developed systems that shoot down drones that are somewhat cheaper, substantially cheaper. I guess what is it? The Ukrainians had actually offered, I guess, the United States offered to sell them to the United States, are now going to sell them to like Saudi Arabia. What is it the Ukrainians do in this?
Well, with the Ukrainians understand the cost benefit, the cost and expense, the way this war goes. The issue that the United States has been faced is these drones probably cost the Iranians $30,000 to make. I mean, maybe some say 50, some say once you get to mass production, they're even cheaper. But let's say $30,000 to $40,000 for one of these Shahed type drones. Well, the United States, if they shoot them down with a Patriot or a THAAD, is spending millions of dollars to take down a $30,000 drone. That's an unsustainable kind of exchange. And plus the United States stockpiles weren't that great to begin with. The United States has fired more Patriots in the few days fighting the Iranians than they've given to Ukraine the entire war. That's to give you the kind of depth of fire. What the Ukrainians understood is they're not going to be able to rely on their expensive systems. They've been trying to keep their Patriots to defend themselves against the very expensive Russian missiles. The hypersonic missiles, the ballistic missiles. That's what they keep their Patriots for. So they said, we have to come up with a system that will protect ourselves against the cheaper drones. And so they've come up with anti-drone drones. That's what these are. They're basically smaller anti-drone drones, and they cost between $1,000 and $5,000. So that actually is a very good cost balance ratio. The United States just didn't have them. And American partners didn't have them because they were relying often on American technology. So Trump will never say thank you, but as soon as they ended up in this situation and their air defense stock came under pressure, they turned to the Ukrainians to the point, and this is actually something that I think should make people stand and think. Ukraine has provided the United States with more aid in 2026 than the United States has provided to Ukraine. The United States has provided no aid to Ukraine in 2026. Ukraine has provided military aid to the United States and to American allies in the Gulf. And people might think about that.
Yeah, there was almost none already in 2025. There's this chart from the Kiel Ukraine support tracker that shows that U.S. aid just disappeared already last year, and it's all European aid at this point. And
Entirely. And
Yeah.
Ukraine's helping us more than we're helping the Ukrainians.
Okay, trying to figure it. So, I mean, air power has, as I know from your writings, been tremendously effective
Mm.
in wars, but there's a context to that. Can you let's talk a little bit about what the U.S. is trying
Air
to do
power
now in
changing.
Iran?
And we're in an era we used to think about air power from an American point of view, and I think the US Air Force probably still did going into this war. And what air power was, first of all, shutting down the ability of the other side to attack you. So
Right.
you would suppress enemy air defense and destroy the other side's ability to strike back. And then once you did that, you would go and take out all the targets you wanted. So it was a phased process, but the first phase was to neutralize the other side's air force. It might be now that you cannot do that, that you cannot fully neutralize the other side's air force and air power because the other side can produce quite cheap drones in large numbers. So until you actually have a good defensive system, you can't do what would have been the first step in American air power, which is to neutralize the other side's air power, which is why, in some ways, both sides can still attack. And that is a change in air power. We've normally seen air power as one a struggle for dominance, one side wins, and when one side wins, it can overwhelm the other side. But we are now in a situation where both sides can continue fighting and actually striking. And that puts things on. I mean, my own view on this is that it's going to lead us down a very dark road. I wrote a little piece on it saying the future of war seems to be range fires and war crimes
Yeah.
because no one's going to be able to stop people from having some kind of ranged air capacity. And it will be very tempting to rely on war crimes to try and get your way, threats, and that kind of coercive behavior. But it does seem to me that we will have a lot of long-range fires and aggressive firing for this period of warfare.
Yeah, I was I found myself reading a little bit about Normandy in World War II, and where the Germans had a terrible time because they really had a very hard time just getting forces to the front because of which. But we're now in a situation. Actually, go back to Ukraine. In Ukraine, both sides are in that position now
Yeah,
because of
because
these ranged fires, so that neither side has effective air or neither side has air superiority, and both have air superiority in the sense that there's this wide zone of death that
and they're producing some. That's it. I mean, even in the Second World War, you would think, oh, the United States made so many aircraft.
yeah.
At its absolute high point, the United States made, I think, 88,000 aircraft in 1944. At the high point of production for 1 year, it was 80 or 90,000 aircraft. Ukraine's going to make 7 million drones this year.
I didn't realize it was that
Yeah,
big.
we're actually outproduced. The number of systems that are being thrown in the air are so much larger. They're not always that effective, but they don't have to be. It's going to be impossible to shoot them all down now unless you have a revolution in the ability to do air defense. And so we are dealing with this world where air power is going to be everywhere, and it's going to be very hard to deal with it. My view on Venezuela was this is not regime change, and it's not bringing
Right.
freedom to the Venezuelan people. It's basically replacing one dictator with a compliant dictator. So it's been great for Trump. It's been
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant for Trump. So God knows where the money's going and who's getting kickbacks in these business deals. But he has a leader in Venezuela who is, I think, playing for time right now, and as she plays for time, is going to make sure that she doesn't get him upset. This was. I didn't understand even the total venality of what he was doing. I thought everyone was saying, oh, well, this is all Rubio trying to bring some freedom and openness to the Venezuela. That's just nonsense. And I think in Iran, the problem is it's much harder to do. It's much farther away. The Iranians have a far more capable military. They've been preparing for this. And also, by the way, the Russians and the Chinese are going to help the Iranians. No one was going to step in for Venezuela.
Right.
But I don't think the Russians or the Chinese are quite keen to see a pro-Western, pro-US Iran. And they're not going to go down without a fight. I mean, so far, the Russians have been helping the Iranians kill Americans, quite clearly helping them do that. And will be interesting to find out, if we ever find out later, what the Chinese have been doing. But I'm assuming they've been helping as well.
There was a comment by Adam Serwer, I think, just a day or two ago, the that the Trump doesn't understand people who act on principle. That the Venezuelan regime was just thugs. It was just a mafia. The Iranians are thugs. They're horrible. They're murderers. But they actually also believe in something, and that they're genuine religious fanatics, and that actually seems to have completely caught them off guard.
Exactly. He just thought someone would play ball for him, is I think what he thought. Yeah, he'd scare somebody. Some second-ranking leader would be brought in to take control. They'd install them, and that they would start cutting deals. He has no idea what he's doing, and that's the scariest thing. That there's just so many things they haven't thought about because they assumed it would be easy. But that's right. I mean, he's got a very different kettle of fish in Iran than Venezuela, and he was a fool to think that they were similar cases.
I am surprised that the military didn't manage to get through at least a sense of fear in Trump, because you must know.
I don't because I actually think, what did Trump do when he first came in? He had an excellent chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Brown, got rid of him. Got rid of them for no other reason, probably because he was a black guy and he was appointed by Biden. And they went through and they've been purging officers. They've been getting rid of officers who they do not trust. And this has created a culture, and they've been doing things like cutting off Ivy League institutions from sending officers there. There is an intellectual chill, a strong intellectual chill in the U.S. military now, and you get promoted not because you're good. You get promoted if you're considered loyal to the regime. So I don't think, it will be interesting to see. I don't think that the U.S. military is capable now of pushing back, because I don't think the personnel who would do it are near the positions of power to try and have that influence. So I really think what we're seeing is something that the Trump administration helped bring about by destroying independent thought in the U.S. military. It's why they're sitting here now not knowing what the heck to do. If the generals did have courage, they'd go to Trump now and say, this is a disaster. But they don't.
Yes, you must have had more than me, but I had some contact. I knew some people in the military. I've given talks at West Point even, would be back in the Obama years, and I was always struck by how smart, well-informed, kind of almost intellectual the U.S. military was. Mm-hmm. But no sign of that now. I guess you're saying that it took only about 13 months to kind of undo all of that.
Sadly, there had been a growth of a MAGA officer corps from the first term.
Okay. I didn't know that.
There were a lot of pro-Trump officers. And I think they knew who some of them were from the first term. And there were a lot of military people who were backing Trump. And my guess is they are the ones now who have been freed by all this to bring their own ideologies to going on. I don't think under any other president we would have had an officer say, this is a holy war where we're going to crush the infidel, which is, I guess now completely, that's what happened. Yeah. That officers are feeling empowered to say that is really scary.
Oh, boy. That worries me not just about the Iran war, but about domestic stuff, because, I hadn't really realized.
I'm saying about this. There's reports that the Iranians might be about to launch some kind of attack on the West Coast, in a ship that has some drones in it. And that this is now a possibility. And I'm like, do you think Kash Patel's FBI is up for the job of protecting, against a counter-terrorist operation on U.S. soil? I don't. Kash Patel's FBI is killing Americans.
We should also think about Tulsi Gabbard as our chief intelligence official. Oh, my God. Okay, so we're now in this stage of war where the attempt to, at one stroke, change the regime has failed. Also one in which it's clear that air superiority ain't what it used to be. How does this campaign unfold?
Well, I think the real question is shipping in the Gulf.
Right.
That is the thing that will bring the crunch. If there was no shipping problem in the Gulf, they could keep pounding away for a few weeks and see if they could bring regime change.
Right.
By pounding away. They cannot have a sustained shut off of shipping in the Gulf. Just cannot happen. That already oil prices have gone up by 50%, and that was even after they thought this might not be a long conflict. If shipping actually stops in the Gulf, it's going to have massive economic ramifications. So my guess is that they are stuck. This is the rock and the hard place. Right. They either have to, in some ways, accept they've lost and allow to say to the Iranians, we're going to back down now, you just behave and let shipping through. Or they have to send ground troops into southern Iran to clear out a buffer zone and allow the shipping to go through. Those seem to be the only other options. They have to get the shipping through. And they're going to have to do it relatively soon. So it's either back down or ground troops.
I can't imagine. I don't think we have that many ground troops.
We don't certainly have that many in theater, I would think, that they built up air power and sea power. They didn't build up ground power, from what we can tell. So they would have to, they'd have to also have really good intelligence to know where they would put those ground troops ashore. I assume they'd need a port to bring in sustainment, to bring in supplies. It's a big operation if they're going to send in ground troops. But if they just rely on air power, they're going to really have to hope they have such good intelligence they'll be able to hit every Iranian drone before it takes off, to hit a tanker. Otherwise, the tankers aren't going to go. They're simply not going to head through the Gulf. That Trump urged them to head through the Gulf a few days ago, and what happened is a lot of them were hit by drones.
Yeah.
So I just don't see it working in the present way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering a little bit, some of the things, the helium, I had not even thought about that. But helium is really critical for the production of, I guess, semiconductors, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess a lot of it goes to Taiwan, I think is what happened. So that if that trade dries up, that there'll be a helium rush around the world. Everyone will be trying to get helium. The price will double, and that means the price of electronics and computers will go up enormously. Everything's going to go up if this goes on.
Well, we're already having this massive crunch with semiconductor memory prices have skyrocketed because of the data centers and AI and all that. But now, I was thinking, I actually don't know at all about the shipping of helium. One of those things you never thought you'd have to think about. But there are other ways out of the Gulf. There's even, I guess, a pipeline that gets you out to the Red Sea, although that ain't great either. But I was wondering whether maybe you could start somehow or other trucking helium out to the Mediterranean. And
I have no idea.
I have no idea either.
I have no idea. The Trump administration never had an idea. They simply not worked this out.
So, I mean, so you're basically saying the one scenario has been that this ends up being a sustained, basically, let's destroy Iran, wipe out their power plants, their water systems, basically.
That's a war crime too, by the way.
That's a war crime. No, at least the Israelis have definitely committed war crimes on that. I'm afraid that the U.S. may be doing it too, but that this would be a sustained thing, something like actually what the Russians have been trying to do to Ukraine with the trying to knock out the power systems. But you don't think that we have time for that? That the urgency of the economic, I
think this means the Republicans face Armageddon in 2026. The longer this goes on, the worse it is for the Republicans now.
Yeah.
And it's already March. They're not that far away from the election. So we're only 7 months away from the election, 8 months away. So I can't see it going on, say, over the summer. Then you're into the campaigning season. And this is already the most unpopular military intervention in U.S. history. Right. No intervention has started with such a low base, and all the independents are against it. It's basically Republicans are for it, and Democrats and independents are very strongly opposed to it. Yeah. So I personally, I think politically, the Republicans are really in a bind here. If Trump had another year, if this was his first year in office, maybe he could continue it for longer. But it'll be hard politically to keep it up. Now, maybe he doesn't care, and maybe he doesn't plan to have free elections. But these are issues that they're going to face if they're going to go in and really try to clear out southern Iran to allow the shipping through. It's not going to be quick.
And one of the things I've been wondering, and again, this is not original, but it's not clear that the Iranians would agree to a quick end even if the United States basically admits defeat.
That is the real wild card. I mean, on the whole, you would think actually probably Iran would like some time to consolidate its rule after getting all this bombing. But of course, they have understood they now have a lot of cards. The Iranians have real cards to play over everyone else in the region by dominating shipping in this way. And so they might demand a lot to stop fighting. I mean, if Trump decides to throw in the towel, which he might, I think there's a chance this is over relatively soon because Trump just simply can't sustain it politically. The Iranians might ask for a lot. In fact, they'll come out of this in better situation. They'll make no more concessions on their nuclear program. Why would they? And they'll demand the end of sanctions. Of course, why wouldn't they? So the Iranians would be in that case. If Trump really needs to get out and get out soon, the Iranians are in a very powerful position.
And there's even the concern that the Iranians may think that they want to see a lot of suffering, just sort of independent of what the United States offers, that they just want to make the point, credibly make the point that they can inflict massive damage, and the only way to make that absolutely clear is by actually inflicting massive damage.
Yep. And I mean, they also they'll want to preserve their leader. I mean, that is one thing. Having blown up one leadership, they probably don't want to lose another. one assumes. So, I mean, there would, but I'm not an Iranian expert, so what the heck do I know? This is one of those, whenever I try to put my own rationality in a leader's mind, that's always wrong. Because I was like, Putin will never, Putin will be shocked. He won't invade Ukraine in 2022. That's such a disastrous decision, of course. Then they go ahead and do it. So I have no idea what they're going to want. But certainly, objectively, they would be in a very strong position if Trump needs to get out now.
Okay. So basically, the kind of sustained war crime campaign you think is just basically untenable from the U.S. point of view, and then there's a question of how does an exit happen?
Yeah, it might happen by basically Trump. I mean, remember what he did last summer too. He bombed Iran once, decided it was over, and then ordered the Israelis to turn around. So he can actually do something like that. That's the way he behaves. He doesn't care about other countries really, and therefore, if he decides he's got to get out to save himself, he'll get out. So there's some talk he's going to say to the Europeans, "You clean up the Gulf. I'm out of there. You guys clean up the Gulf. I made the mess, and you'll be the janitors." And that might be where we are. So if he decides to cut and run, he'll cut and run. That I think is clear, and he won't. He'll just get out. But he'll leave a mess behind. But he is weakening the United States. This might be one of those moments in a marker in American decline. The making the United States weak, making the United States, seem be less powerful than it was. That we could be seeing quite an important historical moment here. Chinese are laughing.
Yeah, and just at the moment, we really need allies. And so, in other news, we've just launched Section 301 investigations against everybody. It's trade sanctions against all of our erstwhile allies. So just, sorry, we're laughing, but it's not funny. It's really kind of scary. Let's go back to the old stomping grounds for a few minutes here. What is happening in the Russia-Ukraine war?
Well, I mean, what is interesting is that Russian advances have basically, they haven't stopped, but the Russians are taking less and less. And for a while, the Ukrainians took more than the Russians. Now, I think the Ukrainians also are not taking a lot now. But the idea that Russians did, it is the analytical community that was talking about the Ukraine is going to have this massive manpower crisis and collapse throughout 2025. They needed more men at the front, draft all these young kids. They're really quiet on that poll. Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't heard a lot of talk about the Ukrainian need to draft everyone and send them to the front. The front line is what the front line is now. It is the kill zone, and the Ukrainians can make some advances when they have communications help. So that actually the Starlink cut, from what we can tell, helped, but there was more than that. But the Russians can only make advances when they sacrifice large numbers of soldiers. And the reality from what I'm hearing, and this is anecdotal, is that the quality of the soldiers the Russians have is going down. They really are. You have to be a pretty odd duck to join the Russian military now.
Yeah.
If you're going to join the Russian military, you are having a bit of a death wish. So we are left now with the land war probably won't change a lot for the next few months. And it will be this ranged war that we see. The Russian winter campaign did a lot of damage to Ukraine, but the Ukrainians have made it through. The weather will get better. It is getting better. It's already warmer. Clearly, Trump helped Putin launch that massive assault by saying, oh, Putin's going to have a ceasefire. Remember that was actually seemed to be a coordinated action where Trump helped Putin go for the big enchilada. And the Russians threw everything into that massive 2 days of attacks in a short period of time to try and drive the Ukrainians out of the war, deprive them of power. That didn't work. It was pretty horrible. There were a lot of colds and people died, but the Ukrainians are going to make it through. I think the question is what happens now in the spring, summer in the ranged war. Ukrainians their systems are getting better. They're getting more effective. They still don't get the big Western systems they'd like the German Tauruses. The Russians, I think, are what the Russians are. They're going to keep pounding away at infrastructure. So it's a situation where I don't want to say it's swinging towards Ukraine, but it's actually better for Ukraine now than it was a while ago. Had Trump not also come to Putin's aid by attacking Iran and driving up the oil prices. Supposedly, I think I saw a story, Russia's making an extra $150 million a day now.
Yeah.
$150 million a day because of what's happened to oil prices. I think the Russian economy would have been in real problems in terms of generating income over the summer, but now they get help with that. So I think we're still in a bit of a stalemate.
Yeah, one actually striking thing is that higher oil prices, although the U.S. is a net exporter of oil, the U.S. If take a national accounting standpoint, the U.S. is richer a little bit because of oil prices, but the U.S. government doesn't capture any of that. It's not there. There is no United States. There's only there's oil companies and there's everybody else, and in Russia, Putin captures a lot of the extra revenue. So it's actually it's a weird thing where this benefits Putin but not the United States. And the comparison to with Iran is that in a way the Russians have already tried against Ukraine the potential sort of dark side of the force U.S.-Israeli approach to Iran now, which is let's knock out the infrastructure, and it didn't work. Despite, and I don't think they have freezing cold winters in Tehran, though I could be, but anyway, we'd certainly done incredible damage to Tehran by, I've seen the photos of the poisonous black smoke covering it, but I don't think there's ever been a case where a terror bombing campaign really worked.
No, I mean, they could even do if they really went against water supplies. Like a city like Tehran has very tenuous water supplies.
Yeah.
And if they go against that would create a famine of really quite extraordinary proportions, we would think, or drought of extraordinary proportions. But the thing about the Iranian people is they don't seem to be at all convinced Trump wants to help them. That twice Trump has said, rise up and I will back you. And in neither case did he back them. And they understand now, I think what they're hearing is that he wants to put in place someone from the old regime. So they didn't try to actually work with the Iranian people. They didn't seem to work with any in the opposition, try and overthrow the regime. So the Iranian people for now just seem to be keeping their head down. Again, I'm not an Iranian expert, but we don't see signs of an immediate uprising to be going along with these U.S. and Israeli air attacks. That does not seem to be happening. And that's probably because of what Trump has done and how he's convinced them of what he stands for.
Well, I'm rather oddly, I'm actually a little bit personally worried, not going to be killed by an Iranian drone, but I have plans. I'm supposed to be doing various stuff in Europe in the spring, and because they're going to be jet fuel supplies. Is there, is how much of the world economy is going to be really disrupted by this? And I guess you're telling me that this goes on until not only does Trump cry uncle, but he cries uncle convincingly enough to get the Iranians to go along.
Yeah, I mean, it might happen soon because I think there must be a huge pressure on him now to get out. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm just looking at. I've never done this. I've never been the kind of person who is constantly
the news
checking
story
the
coming in.
market. But I'm just looking at the price of Brent crude, which is $101 as we speak.
All right, so it's
Um,
over 100 again. Yeah,
yeah,
it went
Brent
down
is.
in the 80s when Trump said the war would be short, and now the markets are figuring out that it's not going to be short. But that's going to be put big pressure on him to end this soon. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, how much is oil now in America for a gallon? If you go fill up your car.
National average was like 365 or something as of yesterday, and
Okay.
rising. And apparently, the real thing is diesel. Diesel has gone up more than $1 a gallon, and there's a lot of red-hatted truck drivers who are
A lot of
very,
baggy
very
truckers.
unhappy right now. Uh, um, Amazing. I'd say let's have another conversation, but I'm afraid that we only have conversations when terrible things happen.
Yeah.
But thanks for the rather grim update, and
Just
let's.
none of this makes sense to me, Paul. None of it makes sense. What the United States is doing, what it's become, the lack of professionalism in the U.S. government. It just seems, I don't know, like a farce.
I mean, I spent a year in the U.S. government more than 40 years ago, and it was the Reagan administration. I was just sub-political level and was shocked at the level of ignorance and incoherence that I saw in 1983.
Hmm.
But people say, "Oh, this is the Reagan administration, it'll this won't happen again." And these guys make the Reagan administration look like consummate professionals.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh my God. I can't imagine. I mean, the picture of the shoes did it for me. I mean, just like look at these group of clowns. They're clowns.
well,
Performing for a ringmaster.
these adhesive shoe tongue inserts. I should. Uh, you can layer them, I think, and maybe the shoes will actually kind of fit if they do that.
And there was the thing. Supposedly, I don't know. Trump would just guess their shoe sizes.
Yeah.
And if they guessed the wrong size, they didn't have enough courage to actually get a pair of shoes that fit. They're wearing shoes because Trump guessed the wrong size. That is a sign of mental illness, I think.
Yeah. Well, brings new meaning to the cliche, if the shoe fits, wear it. So, on that note,
On that
thanks
happy
so
note.
much. And
Take care, Paul.
God help us all.